Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 131 of Mythos Busters. As always, I'm your host, Nick. But not as always, I'm kind of in the lead chair tonight. We got a small crew this evening. It is myself and my good man, Ian. Ian, how you doing?
Oh, hello. I'm doing good. I feel like now it feels like it's been about a decade since we were all together playing games in person.
Right? It's so
like the
weird.
the first couple of days afterwards, I was just in that headspace of like obviously missing you guys and wanting to be playing together again, and it felt very immediate. But it didn't take long for normal life to reassert itself, and just now it feels like it was forever.
Yeah, it was depressingly fast to get back to normal. Absolutely depressingly fast. Scott said something towards the end of our weekend together. He said, like, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna miss the jokes. Like, I'm not gonna be able to joke. And he meant, he was talking about like thinking of something. Like something would come up that would remind him of a joke or something, like an ongoing thing that we were talking about in the weekend. And then feeling sad that he couldn't share that. And my God, that's still happening to me. Like that happened just today where I was like, oh, I miss hanging out with my fellow busters in person. But it also feels like it's been a long time since we've recorded the four of us as well. I know we just did the designer interview, which was awesome. Gosh, when was I'm not going to open that can of worms. Asking what the last episode the four of us were on was. Ugh.
It's been a while. It's definitely been a while since we did our last Edge of the Earth player card reviews.
Yes,
for sure. I know that.
It has. And we're getting back to that tonight. So yeah, tonight's episode, like Ian said, we'll be talking about probably the last bit of Edge of the Earth player cards. So those of you who have been excited that we haven't been covering the campaign yet, well, this is your last episode, and you better get that campaign played, because after this, we're going to start covering the scenarios.
Yep.
But before
we have to do Investigator still. Too,
never mind. All right, you guys got one more episode. You lucked out.
As a treat.
Yeah.
But you got to get on it. Come on.
Yeah, all right. Pick up the pace. Come on. Yeah, God, the Investigators one feels kind of weird because I feel like we've talked about 3 of them already, but I guess, maybe we've learned some stuff after playing them, so I still haven't.
I can't remember, were they all spoiled beforehand or only a few of them?
I don't remember what life was like a month ago.
It's not even worth trying to remember.
Right.
Forget it.
Yeah. But Ian, happy Pride Month, man.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
To all our listeners out there.
Yeah. So yeah, it is Pride Month, obviously. So we at mythosmerch.com, we're bringing back all of our Pride merchandise from previous years, as well as introducing some new things. So you should go and check out mythosmerch.com. Just like last time, we will be donating 100% of the proceeds from our Pride items to the Trans Lifeline charity. So we encourage you to pick up whatever strikes your fancy out of the old items and the new items, because all of that money's going to a good cause. So
yeah, definitely. And I'm probably going a little bit off book here without clearing it with you guys, but it's a tough time right now out there for trans folks. So I'm feeling even more so than usual. I'm glad that even though it's a very small amount in the grand scheme of things, that we can do anything to support a charity like Trans Lifeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally agree. So yeah, make sure you at least check it out. And like I said, if anything strikes your fancy, pick it up and feel good about where that money's going. Because we're not keeping any of it. We're sending it all right along. Also, as we were talking about just earlier, Iron Man just happened. Most likely you're aware, but we have all of our Iron Man content available to watch. We streamed all of Iron Man. It's up in 2 parts on our YouTube, so you can go and check that. If you're listening to this on your RSS feed, then the link for the first part will be included in the show notes. And then obviously that should lead you right into the second part from there. It was long, but it wasn't as long. It definitely wasn't as long as TCU.
No, definitely.
Probably because I was there to keep everybody on track. I mean, obviously you all just kind of, you just kind of wander off, and I got to keep you all focused. No, I'm kidding. But it didn't feel nearly as long as like the Forgotten Age or even as Carcosa did.
Yeah, I haven't done any like analysis of other groups as well to see, but my kind of surface impression was that other groups kind of were in a similar boat to us. The other groups, I think, took longer to do TCU than they did for Dream Eaters. I don't know if it was just a campaign specific thing or it was the streaming thing. Probably a combination of both.
Right. Do you remember
like
what
playing on TTS?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That I was just about to ask. Do you remember what caused TCU to go so long? But then you answered it right there. I would imagine that playing on TTS contributed, hand over foot, if that's how that saying goes, to the length of that campaign.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was just and feeling like we had to narrate every action we were doing, like we were doing a normal TTS stream. Whereas when we were playing in person in Iron Man, I think it was you who said it, but I can't remember. Someone was just saying like it's like the streaming setup actually just like fades away and is invisible after a while you're playing. And so we were just playing Iron Man like we normally do. At least for me, I know. I there are times I was kind of aware I was streaming, but most of the time we were just playing like we normally do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally, 100%. It felt like just hanging out and playing Arkham, which was great. And it wasn't really until like between scenarios when I had to get up to go to the bathroom or when Sean would start talking about the hashtags, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, we got an audience. So huge thank you to Sean for sacrificing space in his home for us to stream that, and huge thank you to Justin as well for not only helping to get everything set up but also captaining the ship from behind the camera the whole time. None of this would have been possible without his help, and also, like I said, without Sean giving us the space for it, and both of them devoting so much time and effort to figuring out how to get it running. So you should go watch that on YouTube if you didn't watch it already, or at least watch some of it. You should go watch it this weekend, and see the fruits of our labors. But yeah, other than that, Ian, have you been playing any Arkham since Iron Man?
I have actually. Surprise. As often happens when we get together and play, it often kind of rekindles my desire to play Arkham instead of tiring me out from Arkham, which would probably be a lot of people's assumptions. Although lately I haven't been playing as much Arkham, not so much for not wanting to, but just time-wise. But I have been able to find some time recently. So I've finally played through Machinations of Time.
Oh, nice.
Have you played that one yet?
I've played it twice. I played it once with Sean, and then I played it once two-handed on my own. Those were very different experiences.
Yes.
How was your game of it?
Yeah, so those of you who haven't played it, I won't go ton into spoilers, so don't worry, but just my impressions of it. I really like a lot of what was done in the scenario, and it's my kind of scenario in terms of kind of dumping a lot on the plate of players and being a little complicated. Like, I actually like that kind of thing, and digging more into that crunchiness. But I will say, after playing it, I can clearly see that it would be a much better experience, epic multiplayer, I think. Not that I didn't enjoy it two-handed, but I can just there's just a lot to do and cover in two-handed.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to keep track of. Again, without going into too many spoilers, there's just so many different effects going on. And I kept thinking, if this was epic multiplayer, I would only have to worry about like this part of it.
Right, yeah, like a third of what's on the table.
Which I think, even as much as I like having lots of stuff going on, I think would probably enhance my experience to just be like, we're just going to worry about this part of it, and we can explore some of this mechanics more. I think playing it two-handed, you just have to really, really focus in on the win condition.
Right.
Keeping it vague, but and just focus on that. And so, again, yeah, I think it's fun two-player, but it's one that I want to play in epic multiplayer for sure.
Mm-hmm. Did you end up getting a win on that scenario?
No, I was one turn away, a single turn away from winning. Yeah. and part of it, I think, was I probably wasted some turns here and there doing some stuff that I probably didn't need to do. But
like playing cards.
Who needs to do that?
Yeah, right? If you're taking a turn to play assets and machinations, then you're behind.
But it was a face check play, so it's fine.
Yeah. No, it's a super tight scenario. Like we talk about where the gods dwell being tight, but machinations. The thing about that scenario, and when I played it with Sean, it honestly felt like it was just another scenario. It felt like there was a little bit more on the board, but that was because I had another person who had already played it, and so it didn't feel as brain burny at that point because we were kind of like splitting our attention. You know what I mean? Like he would remind me of stuff, and then I'd remind him of stuff, and that sort of thing. So and we won. So it felt fun and great and all that. And I was like, and then I was running a campaign a little while ago. I can't even remember who I was. I think it was Roland and Akachi back when I did the two of them through Innsmouth, and I was throwing in a bunch of standalones. And I was like, oh, I'll do Machinations because I haven't played it since I played it with Sean. And so I put it on the table and I did two-handed, and oh my God, it felt like a totally different play. And it was over, and I don't think I did 20% of what I had to do. Like, I was just trying to run interference against what all of the different things the encounter deck was trying to do to me. I was just trying to keep that kind of stuff from happening. And then next thing I know, I lost. I'm like, what? Like, what happened? This didn't feel this way at all. So yeah, but it's really fun, and the theme is really cool. It has very strong, like, Back to the Future vibes, like original Back to the Future, which is awesome. And it's like, it's just one that I'm gonna have to try again, I think. Like, part of me is like, don't do it again until you have someone else to play with. But there's another part of me that's like, no, I can do better. I can. It's not impossible to win solo. I can beat it solo. I should. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, and part of me is like, I could do epic multiplayer by myself. Do the different parts. It's fine.
Just do one investigator in each one. Like, play three-handed essentially.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking of. But that's gonna be a night when I'm like not tired and fully focused and have lots of brain space, because otherwise
home alone with the whole day off, and other mythical stories that we tell ourselves. We're trying to fall asleep at night.
That's a nice story.
Any other Arkham other than that?
Other than Machinations, I know I've talked before about sometime, like, this has been happening a lot with Edge of the Earth, where it's, for various reasons, it's been a while since I've been playing a campaign, and so I'm like, I'm just gonna go back and start another one. So I did start a new one with Diana and Daisy, and I'm trying out a Diana Dragon Pole build, which I haven't tried before.
Okay.
Only one scenario far through, so no big verdict on it yet. I think it should work okay. It's mostly just kind of an experimental type thing to see how Dragon Pole's going to work out.
Sure.
The funny thing is, I think there's probably some like Mystic Investigators that I would want to run it in, but Diana just happens to have the right kind of like access and class access for what I want to do with it. So, like, go more
combat heavy stuff with the Guardian side of her, or?
Yeah, pretty much, and getting things like the Bandolier in there, so I can have the Dragon Pole and other stuff in my hand, like
sure,
because like Sign Magic, for example, is a hand slot, but in order to run that with Dragon Pole, then you need another hand slot, so getting that Bandolier access. So it's definitely something with Diana where it's this kind of build that it just requires getting lots of assets into play. So. It would never work as a solo build, but two-handed, I'm running it with Daisy, like a Tome Daisy.
Sure.
Which I've played Daisy quite a bit because she's been in the game forever, since the core set. But I've never really, like, she's not one I get excited about playing usually. I'm just like, 5 intellect, it's, secret things, it's fine.
Just build Seeker.
But I'm running this like Tome Daisy, and books are fun. I I find the tomes, and obviously we've had tomes for a while, but there's just a lot of tomes in the game now, and lots of ways to play with it. So I think I'm enjoying Daisy more now than I ever have before. So that's a fun little build. But all that being said, I decided, you know what? It's dumb to just leave these campaigns in the past. So I went back and started up my Luke and Daniela campaign, which was like in the second to last scenario of Edge of the Earth. So I decided I am going to go back and finish those campaigns because I have Arkham cards and it's going to tell me all the stuff that I forgot. So.
There you go.
But that's about it for me.
Nice. I have actually been playing just like with you, just like what you said, where you'd think that Iron Man would kind of like drain us of our Arkham drive for a little while. It instead has reinvigorated me. I still have to get back to Achievement Hunter. I have one more episode that I need to edit and post. I apologize for the delay on the release on that, dear listeners. It is coming. It will come out. But I also have to get back to playing that campaign. But what I did do when I got back from Iron Man was I immediately started theory crafting what deck I was going to play in Innsmouth Iron Man next year.
Oh, wow.
This is probably the earliest, and obviously a lot can change because there's probably going to be hopefully going to be an Investigator expansion release between now and then. I guess we don't know how far away Scarlet Keys is, but hopefully it's sooner than 11 months. But anyway, so I built a Tommy deck because I figured that Tommy's a good investigator for Innsmouth, primarily because he has a lot of soak, obviously, and because he can kind of build those combat decks that don't require you to be engaged with an enemy. So we're not doubling up on the bad sides of those deep ones. If someone draws it other than me, I can just shoot at it when it's engaged with them, maybe even from a location away, without having to worry about me taking it and also dealing with the ingot. But if I do have to take it off of someone, then I have the soak available. So I built a Tommy deck like that. It's main weapons are obviously Becky and Winchester, and he's running Hit Me, 2 copies of Hit Me. And this is the first time I've ever done this. I took, within the thick of it, I'm running level 2 Eat Lead. And I have a couple other things because of Becky, obviously. That's what it was. I was like, I know I have something for ammo. It's Becky. So then that way I can, if I have Becky out, I can ensure I get a shot. And if I have the Winchester out, I have Hit Me to let me kind of filter through tokens a little bit or do a double draw, hoping to get something that'll get that +2 damage off of it. So it's been doing great. I haven't even had to use the Winchester yet, so I might remove it and put something else in there. But Becky's been awesome. So running upgrades now for that. So I've got double reliable in there. I've got jury rig from his survivor access, which is nice. And who's he paired with right now? It's on the table right there. Oh, Amanda. Because last time I played Amanda was when I tried to do that Abranda Sharp deck, which wasn't really a fair shake at Amanda.
Sure.
So, and I was looking at her and I'm like, I can't. This is my problem now, is that when I read an investigator that isn't your kind of like bog standard investigator, if they have a weird deck building, I'm like, my brain just goes like, it just shuts off, and I'm like, I don't know how to do this. So I actually net decked for Amanda. And pulled a deck. I don't remember what the list was now, so I apologize for not having that ready for the episode, but I made edits to it. I changed it a little bit to make it complement Tommy a little bit better. But one thing that I was like, oh, she doesn't have, like, this Amanda deck I found isn't running the Dream Diary. That seems like a very obvious pick for Amanda. So I threw that in there. And I've upgraded one of them right now just because of the experience that I got. And they're doing great. We're just about to start Into Deep. Pit of Despair went pretty well. We got all but one of the memories. Nice. And then, that felt pretty good. And then, what's the disappearance or the vanishing of Alina Harper? That one they did really well in. So that felt nice to kind of get two pretty solid wins in there. So we'll see how the next scenario goes. But it's really about all the Arkham that I've played.
But how many Council's Coffer are you running?
0. God damn it, I can't believe I felt so good about including it and Ace of Rods, and I was like, yeah, this is a shoe-in, and then literally turn 1, commit Council's Coffer to a skill test. Oh,
one day we'll make it happen. One day.
I'm gonna, you know what? Every time we play a standalone game now, every time we stream a standalone game, I'll make sure I include Council's Coffer. You know what I should do? I should edit my Roland deck for Dark Matter and just take out 2 experience and put in Council's Coffer and just see what Sean says when it hits table. Oh.
We should have that as one of our like channel points things that like someone has to shuffle Council's Coffer to the deck.
Oh man. Gosh, there was something else I was going to say that was Arkham related and now I can't. Oh, yeah, and I have 2 other decks, 2 other investigators that I'm going to the next 2 that I'm going to play for whatever the campaign it is. I decided that I wanted to try Parallel Wendy now that I actually have the physical Parallel Wendy cards. And I was like, I went, who's a good investigator to pair with Parallel Wendy? Well, probably anybody that uses Bless or Curse, obviously. So I was like, I'll take that Norman Curse deck that I made, that 42 experience or whatever it was, and I'll just level it down and pair that with her. So I built Tommy and Amanda, and then I set them aside, and I started to work on Wendy and Norman. And what I mentioned before about how my brain kind of shuts off at weird deck building, well, both Parallel Wendy and Norman are what I would classify as weird deck building, because I was like, I'll figure this out later. So I set them aside. I'm like, I will play them next, but I'm not going to build their decks yet. I'll worry about them when I have the brain space for it. But I'm excited to try Parallel Wendy. She'll be the second Parallel. I've only played Roland, and now soon to be her. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I've only tried her solo. I need to go back because I did have a lot of fun with it, but I haven't tried her scenario either. Have I tried all the other ones? I think so.
Agnes.
At least once. Yeah. I've tried
it's all the core
Skids
sets
for
now.
sure.
So.
Yeah. I think Wendy's the one I haven't tried yet.
Okay. But yeah, that's so that was it for me. But for those of you listening, if you noticed anything that Ian or I said and you're like, well, that's just wrong, or if you have something you want us to talk about or you got an unpopular opinion about a card or an investigator, you should give us a call and let us know. We have a couple of voicemails in the wings still. We're not going to play them tonight. We have one that's super long that we're still trying to figure out how we're going to tackle it, because it's a great subject. But anyway, you should give us a call at 203-493-MYTH. That's 203-493-6984. And obviously, if you are on Facebook on your mobile device, you can just click the call button on our Facebook page, and that'll call us as well. If you don't want to leave a voicemail, but you still want to ask us a question or mention something, you can always send us a recording as well. That works just fine. And yeah, when we get some of those, we play them on the podcast, and we have a nice little discussion about it. So make sure you do that. Ian, what's our patron situation like right now?
All right, so thanks to our board members, that's Chris B, Chris H, Chris M, and Chris U, our conglomeration of Chris's, Morton, Jared, Ian, Kyle, Philip, Patrick, Abilio, Jesse, Chad, and Robert. Thanks so much for your support of the podcast and letting us do all the things we do. And we do have a special shout out to a random patron this time around, goes to Stargrove. Thank you, Stargrove, for your support as well. As we mentioned at the top, we gave a shout out to our Pride merch on mythosmerch.com, so make sure you check that out. And we do always ask if you can send us pictures of you wearing our swag, because we love seeing that. But especially now for the Pride merch, if you got any pictures wearing that, we'd love to share that out there for some Mythos Pride love. I think that's about it for patron stuff for this time around.
All right. As far as news, the only news from FFG specifically is that the Investigator expansion for Carcosa, the Path to Carcosa, is now available. So if you're one of those people that likes the big box storage, you can pick it. Well, I guess the Investigator expansions don't have that. But if you're someone who is missing scenarios, or if you just want more copies of the Investigator cards or the player cards from Carcosa, you can go and pick that up. But as anyone who listened to our last episode or saw our post on Reddit knows, we had a very nice, very juicy reveal on episode 130 of Mythos Busters, where MJ and Duke were on, and we got to talk to them, but they revealed the investigator Charlie Kane, as well as his signatures, his weakness, and his signature card. It was a very exciting reveal. I'm still like, I might end up kicking Norman to the curb and just proxying Charlie, because it's a very exciting prospect.
I still can't believe that we got to have the Charlie Kane reveal on our show.
I know.
It's been such a big thing. People have been speculating about Charlie Kane forever. And not only that, they brought along, the SIG cards too. So, yeah. Even though I don't usually proxy as well, I think there's going to be some Charlie proxies in the future for me, because I just got to try it.
Yeah.
I just have to.
Well, it's also been rare that we've had all the information we need to try out an investigator.
Yeah,
So
even the deck building.
Yeah,
too,
exactly.
everything.
We
Yeah.
normally see like just the front, or we see the front and back of one, but then we only see the front of another, and we don't see the SIGs or anything. So yeah, it's very exciting. And if you want to listen to hear our reactions as they happen, you should go back and listen to episode 130. But if you just want the card images and all that, you can go check out our post on Reddit. Yeah, and that's it for news. Scott's not here, so there are no rules.
There are no rules.
So that means we are jumping right into our player card review. And we're picking up where we left off a few episodes ago now. Gosh, it's probably a month and a half ago now at this point. With Sleuth. Ian, do you want to read Sleuth for us?
I sure will. So Sleuth is a tri-class, whatever we want to call it, card. It's Guardian, Seeker, and Mystic. 3 cost, level 3, 2 intellect icons, talent trait. Uses 2 resources. Replenish these resources at the start of each round. Resources on Sleuth may be spent to pay for Charm, Tactic, or Tome cards. Free trigger during a skill test on a Charm, Tactic, or Tome card. Spend 1 resource from Sleuth. You get +1 skill value for this test.
So
we talked last time about, what is that card? Prophetic?
Prophetic, yes.
And we have a few more coming up. So I think it's really just a matter of talking about like each one. What do these cards really give you access to in terms of the traits?
Right. We sang Prophetic's praises pretty heavily, if I remember right. It's been a while, but I feel like we did. Sleuth, it also seems really good. Okay, now I gotta remind myself what Prophetic does. It does Fortune, Spell, or Spirit. Okay, that's right.
Yep.
Well, Spell and Spirit already have good overlap there. The real strength of Prophetic is obviously in its spells. And then you can also get some Spirit play as well if you're taking it for spells, which most likely you are. Sleuth, I feel like the main reason you take Sleuth is for the Tome play. But I don't think that Tome overlaps well with Tactic or Charm.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird mix, really. Like, yeah, my eye immediately goes to the Tome as well, especially because I've got Daisy on the brain. And just like, Tomes are assets, and they usually cost a good amount of money, so being able to contribute to that, and they usually have some kind of skill test on them.
Right.
But yeah, when you look at them, like, especially like Tactic versus Tome, like those seem like 2 different worlds, really.
Right, yeah.
Tactics, you're thinking more of like enemy management type things, or at least in that type of world. And then Charm's the one that's really out of left field that I had to look up what's there. And so some of the heavy hitters here, well, I don't know if they're heavy hitters, but ones that are that kind of stick out that are used often are like, you have Dream Diary, but it's also a Tome, so that doesn't matter much. Right. But like Holy Rosary is a Charm. So at least in terms of paying for it. Lucky Sig Case is a Charm. Let's see, Rabbit's Foot is a Charm. Scrying Mirror, Talisman of Protection.
Yeah, St. Hubert's Key, which I mean that's a big cost one, so that would be nice to get that reduction there. What I'm noticing primarily with charms is that there's a lot of survivors in here for charms, and that's what my brain went to immediately. Was when I saw the charm keyword, I thought red, and then I looked up at the classes in the corner, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's
There's the red there.
yeah, like that's a little weird. But yeah, looking at the list of charms, the thing with charm versus spell or tome, you're probably only running one of these charm cards at a time. You know, you're probably not. And of course there's going to be an example. Someone's going to link an Arkham DB deck this is my, Diana charm deck. It's all the charms or something. I don't know. But you're probably, you know what I mean? Like you're probably only running Holy Rosary or Lucky Sig Case. If you're Seeker, you're probably only taking Dream Diary, or depending on your build, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's...
And a lot of the charms are like, they don't necessarily have skill tests on them.
Right.
Compared to tomes, so it's mostly it would just be contributing to paying for them.
Yeah.
And not so much the other piece of the ability. Now I gotta do a tactics search.
That's what I was just doing.
This is a trait that comes up a lot.
Yeah, tactics is a hefty list, 74 cards.
Oof.
And the vast majority of them are, you guessed it, Guardian. There's a ton of Guardian tactic cards.
Yeah, for Seeker, you could help pay or do the skill test for, like, I've got a plan.
And that's really about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of different events.
Yeah.
Sneak attack, 1-2 punch, etc. Too many to go over. But, yeah, I think... and someone is pointing out in chat that there's only, like, 2 Arkham DB decks with Sleuth in it.
Yeah.
But as is the case with some others of these tri-class, I know for myself at least, is like I run into this thing of like these traits are so disparate and cover so many cards that it's kind of hard to wrap my brain around. And so when it comes to deck building, I'm almost like, I don't want to take the time to think about this. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm just gonna put something else in here.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, these really require some thinking at either before or after the fact of what traits you're really using in your deck and how much bang you're really going to get for your buck here. Like,
right.
Yes, it can help pay for tomes potentially, but then you would have to look at your deck and be like, okay, this costs 3 resources. It's going to replenish the resources, but how many tomes do I need to pay for? And does my existing like resource gen cards like probably crack the case and something else?
Right.
Like, does that cover it enough where I don't even need this?
Yeah, and Sleuth, this is a card like Seekers are most likely to take this. Mystics might take it. I don't think you're taking this one at all if you're a Guardian. Like even tactic aficionado himself, Mark. He's not. You're not going to spend 3
Probably
experience
not, no.
and the deck space on this for Sleuth. So, and I feel like this is to get a little prophetic, I guess. This is a discussion that we're probably going to have a couple times with these cards. Is there's going to be 1 or 2 standouts that feel really good, and will get a lot of use and a lot of positive from us, and then there'll be the rest of them will be a little more middling, and that's okay. But yeah. But yeah,
I feel like my gut impression would be this would probably be like a heavy tome build. Would probably be where you would go for this,
right.
And I'm still trying to decide. Like, I have that Tome Daisy deck going. Like, am I gonna spend 6 XP to get 2 copies of this, or 3 XP for a single copy?
That's literally the deck. Like, that's the deck to take it. So if you don't take it in that says something.
Like, I'm trying to think of my resource situation in that deck, and I'm like, I'm usually able to get tomes out because that's the main cost. Like, it's not paying for too much other stuff,
right.
And Seeker happens to have a good amount of resource gen. Obviously, you can get the boost on skill tests, but like
right.
the tomes I have, like, Old Book of Lore is not a skill test.
Right.
And what else do I have in that deck? The Scroll of Prophecy, I think that's that
That's
one.
yeah, that's not a skill test.
Card draw type stuff. A lot of the tomes aren't even skill tests.
Right.
So.
But medical texts.
Yeah.
This could play it for free, and you could get the +2.
There you go.
Yep.
The medical text meta begins.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, no. All right.
We've been waiting for this moment. Yeah, I think Prophetic is better than Sleuth.
Totally.
I would safely say.
I also think that Bruiser is better than Sleuth. So Bruiser, it's the same card. It's just it's Guardian, Rogue, Survivor, 3 costs, 3 experience, 2 combat icons, talent. All the same text except for the traits on it are armor, firearm, and melee. Or melee, I guess, depending on what state you're from or whatever. Armor never gets used. Like, I never, ever think about the armor part. But holy cow, firearm and melee, this does everything you want it to. There's so much, you can get so much mileage out of Bruiser. I would even go so far as to say you will get the most mileage out of Bruiser out of all of these 5 tri-class cards. Bruiser's going to be the one that'll give you the most bang for your buck overall. Because if you're taking it, you're running weapons. And this covers all weapons. Whereas, Prophetic, you're taking it probably just for spells. Sleuth, you're probably just taking it for tomes. Bruiser, I feel like those 2 traits, firearm and melee, that covers any deck that's including weapons. So
yeah, I mean, we'll have to go through the remaining ones to refresh my memory of what the other ones do. But so far, just looking at Bruiser, that seems to be a pretty good bet, because unlike Sleuth, which we just looked at, where we mentioned it's all over the place in terms of traits, like this is very cohesive. Even with armor, we're all talking about assets that are usually pretty high cost that have to do with fighting enemies. So you have armor, firearm, melee. It's all very very similar to each other in what you're trying to do. And guardians often need help in paying for stuff. So and most of those cards, unlike some of the other traits we talked about with Sleuth, like most of these types of cards involve, at least the firearm and melee involve some skill tests along the way. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty good one for sure.
Yeah, anything that helps get those weapons out faster, having those 2 resources a turn, that's where I think I've used this the most with Bruiser, is paying for this stuff. Big Kahuna in chat brings up no ranged weapons on this. You're right. The 2 bows that exist in Arkham Horror don't really synergize with Bruiser. But I guess I'm fine with that. Yeah, I really don't have anything else to say other than anytime I have... Oh, also no boxing gloves. Boxing gloves aren't melee? Really? That's interesting. Anyway, that's so like Bruiser. Like, you think this he's throwing a punch in the art.
Yeah. If anything is going to have to do with being a Bruiser, yeah.
Interesting. But no, this is the one that I've included the most in decks, and I don't think I've ever regretted it. So, great card.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start using this one more for... yeah, and it's got those 2 combat icons for well prepared if you're doing well.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
exactly. So,
well, you can tell we like this one more because we're spending a lot less time on it for Sleuth.
That's true. But before we move on, I'm going to ask, and this is a general question just about these cards in general, these 3 class ones. So you've included some of these in your decks. Do you find that you tend to go for 2 copies, or do you just stop at 1?
That's a good question. I feel like because of the 3 XP, I'd be more inclined to go a single copy, even though I tend to like 2 copies of most cards, and especially the important ones. But when we're talking about something like this, where it's more of a like facilitator, but I'm likely have other resource gen cards in my deck, and I also have other stuff that can boost my skill value for this for a test. And I'm probably not aiming to get down 2 of these. And I feel like you kind of get diminishing returns with a second copy. So I don't know. I'd be more inclined for a single copy, I think.
I included 2 copies of Prophetic once, and I regretted spending the experience on the
Okay.
second one.
Good to know.
And ever since then, yeah, now I just treat them as a 1 copy of, because you're right. These aren't like a keystone of your deck strategy. These are these are just grease for the wheels. They make everything else happen easier. The 3 resource cost is not nothing. Like the fact that they all cost 3 resources to get out means you have to. There will be turns where you'll have this in hand, and you'll have to wait a turn or 2 to play it. But once it's out, like everything just gets a little bit easier. So that means I kind of treat them like the the tarot cards. I put 1 in because I'm not relying on it, but if and when it does hit table, it'll really, really help. Yeah, I don't think 2 is I think that's too much experience. I think spending 6 for 2 copies of this is a bit much. But, I don't know. Maybe you have a lot of expensive guns and you want to get them all out for -4 resources.
Kind of similarly, a question I have is, and this might go against what we just said, which is this one that's really meant for, like, you want to see this in the early game, and if this pops up later in the game, you're probably not going to spend time and money to put it down.
Yeah, I could see that as well. I've definitely had games where this didn't come up until, like, the last couple turns, and I didn't even bother playing it. Like, then I just committed it. But of the times that I've included Bruiser and Prophetic, because those are the only 2 I've included, most of the time I tend to get them out around the middle of the game. And it honestly, it feels like there's suddenly this release and pressure. Like I'm like, oh, thank God, it's one less thing I have to worry about now. You know what I mean? Once it hits table. So I think that these still have, especially with firearm and spells with Prophetic, because those are the assets that are kind of on a timer. They have the limited uses. So you're going to be replacing them anyway. So I think mid game it's not that bad of an idea, but yeah, late game for sure. It's kind of like, well, what's the use? Like at that point, any asset late game, you're like, why are you here?
Yeah. 2 combat icons.
Yep, exactly.
Commit it.
Overpower. All right. Well, do you want to move us along with Crafty then? Mm-hmm.
So Crafty is Seeker, Rogue, and Survivor. Same thing, 3 cost, level 3, 2 agility icons. And the difference here is everything else is the same as we've seen before, except for now we are looking at Insight, Tool, or Trick cards.
This one screams Seeker to me.
Well, especially for all the insights, for sure. Like, Seeker is the insight class, for sure.
Yeah, and even Tool. Like, I guess when I think of Tool, and it might be just a Joe Diamond thing, but when I think of Tool, I think of... I think of Yellow. I think of Fingerprint Kit and Magnifying Glass and Hawkeye Folding Camera. I can't even name any tools that aren't... Let's do a search. What else is... lockpicks. Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, that would potentially be a good one for sure. Lockpicks. The chainsaw is a tool, huh?
I like it.
I don't think I've noticed that before.
God, I keep forgetting chainsaw exists. I need to play a chainsaw deck.
Yeah, definitely like fingerprint kit, funding your fingerprint kits, flashlights. Gravedigger shovel is interesting.
Yeah. So, and this was one that, because I just played Joe for Iron Man, I thought about including Crafty in Joe because of both Insight and Tool. Those are both things that Joe is all about. Tool's a little less. That's just what his guns give you, the extra hand slots for tools. But the reason why I didn't was because I had enough resource gen in the deck anyway, and all of his insight cards were in the hunch deck, and those play for -2 cost anyway. So even though this card screams Joe, it felt kind of weird putting it in him.
Yeah, I think his ability kind of pulls against it a little bit.
Right.
For sure. I think looking at a lot of the inside events, I think I could see some use here when you get a lot of the like 2-cost seeker events that you might be more on the bubble of including, like logical reasoning and prep sketches. Let's see, what else do we have here? Working a hunch, like
yeah.
I mean, those are some cards that I might include anyway, but it could at least help pay for them.
Right.
I don't know that I'm super excited for it, but
yeah, exactly. Well, that's another thing too, like, and that might be what we're seeing with these, is that these tri-class cards, at least to us in the way that we approach the game, at least for me, these are only as exciting as the assets that they fuel. Like if these are only going towards events, or primarily going towards events, like in the case of this and Sleuth as well, it doesn't feel as, which is weird to say, because how many times do we look at an event and we go, oh, it costs 3, that's too much. Like that, it's hard for me to make 3 or 4 cost work as an event. But for some reason, reading this, it's like, no, I want to get my tableau going. I don't necessarily need, it's such a weird, I can't even describe it. Like I can't even explain why, but that's where I sit with it.
No, I totally get it. Like it, just from our reaction so far, it definitely seems like being able to play the assets is more of the interesting thing, which, I mean, there are decks that you can run where events can sometimes be tricky because like paying resources for a one-time effect can hurt when you want to spend resources for assets. So maybe that frees up some of those. I don't know. I did see one thing that I like here, looking through the list of tricks, and that's something like a combo where you're running this and level 2 Slip Away, which is cost 2, which is the one that when you succeed by 3 or more, you can return it to your hand at the end of your turn. So potentially you could get a little combo going with that and Slip Away, where you're just using Crafty to keep paying the Slip Away cost, and you can just do it like over and over again. Like, I know. I was thinking that in my head too. Big Kahuna in chat's mentioning just run Daddy Chuck, and as I was going through it, I just saw the specter of Daddy Chuck in my head, as I often do. So.
You're holding this card.
I mean, when don't I really?
You're holding this card like, yeah, all right, I see a use for Crafty, and meanwhile Chuck just puts his hand on your shoulder, and like, Ian, put the card down. No,
Daddy Chuck's here.
But you had me going too, because also level 2 Cheap Shot does the same thing, bounces back to your hand. You totally had me going. I was like, oh yeah, you could use Crafty for those bounce back to hand rogue events, but you know what? Yeah, if you're gonna do that, just spend the 2 extra experience and also give them fast.
Yeah. I mean, I might try it at some point just to see how it feels, but I don't know that I'll feel good about it, but we'll see.
It's 2 fewer experience, and it's you get to repeat it every turn. Well, I guess you can with Chuck as well, but it's 2 fewer experience, so it's easier to get going. It's also 2 fewer resources to get this into play. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, kind of circling back around, it seems like that maybe it's mostly like a seeker tool type thing, where it's helping you get out your investigation tools faster and potentially helping pay for some insight stuff here and there.
Right. Yeah, because that the first fingerprint kit, that's not a problem. The second one, that 4 cost, that can be a problem sometimes, and this would definitely help with that. But I don't know. I gotta try it. It's just a shame that it doesn't work well, and that it's not as enticing in Joe. That's a shame.
Yeah. I think this is also one of those ones similar to Sleuth, where it's like 3 traits that are, I mean, Insight and Tool are kind of in the same realm, but then you throw Trick in there, it just muddies the waters a little bit. I mean, it does expand the pool of cards it can access, but it just makes it harder to deck build around almost.
Right. But there are a lot of tricks, especially in Rogue and Survivor, especially Survivor. Survivor's a lot of tricks. All right, but then we've got our last one, which is Antiquary. Antiquary is the Seeker Rogue Mystic version of this type of card. Everything's the same. This one has 1 wild, so it doesn't have the double skill icon. So already you're kind of in a weird place with 1 wild. And the traits that this one looks for are Favor, Relic, or Ritual? You want to talk about a weird collection of traits?
Yeah.
What the heck's going on here?
One of these does not look like the other.
Right?
Like Relic and Ritual, sure.
Yeah.
Like, those go along.
Yeah.
But Favor? How
Favor.
did Favor make it into the party?
They had to get Rogue in there somehow, and they already used Charm, I guess. I don't know. Oh, this is a weird one. This one I feel like, looking at it, I feel better about it than Sleuth or Crafty, but I don't feel as strong as Prophetic or Bruiser. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think my eye, being a big Rogue player, immediately does go to the Favor trait, though, and just thinking about cards like Intel Report and Decoy and Small Favor, those suite of favors where you just pay to do something.
That's true.
And those are all, 2 cost as a base. You can pump it up, obviously. But that at least gets you that base cost going. And if you are going to be paying that a ton, if you are going that kind of like pay to do stuff type build, like maybe even a Preston or something,
that's
that
what
I
was
could
just
see
thinking.
Maybe this could help pay for stuff and let you do even more.
I was just thinking that this might honestly be not an auto include, but I wonder if this is best fit in Preston, which is also weird because if anyone has trouble not paying for shit, it's Preston.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, like Money Talks is a favor, and there was another one I saw that screamed Preston. Now I can't find it.
Oh, counter espionage.
Yes, yeah, that was the other one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I might need to look into this for that. But then when I'm looking at Relic and Rituals, which, like, I feel you're either going for the favors or you're going for Relic / Ritual, because it's just a weird mix of cards otherwise.
Right.
Let's see. Relics, I mean, there's obviously just lots of different relics because it's just anything that's kind of a weird artifact from the past. But I mean, there's a lot of great cards that people love in this category, like everything from Aeon Chart, which we were raving about last time. Cyclopean Hammer, another hot card at the moment. Let's see what else. Grotesque Statue, Hallowed Mirror, Lucky Dice in there. There's the Red Clock, which I love. So all of these kind of big time, like splashy assets that have big effects, Time Worn Brand, are all relics. So
Relic is,
I mean, they could help pay for that stuff. I think the only thing is it's usually, unless you're building a weird Ursula relic thing, you're not building a relic deck. You just happen to have some relics in there.
Yeah. Relic is also, I'm still going through the list, but I'm at 6 so far. Relic is included on 6 different investigator signatures. 7. I'm up to 7 now.
Interesting.
Yeah, so not that that's why you would take it in your deck. Also, there's a lot of campaign rewards, scenario rewards that are relics as well. So this might be one that you would think about including after you've played a few standalones and you've gotten stuff in your deck and you're like, oh, suddenly I have 3 relics. But yeah, I think you're right with the relic part. The ritual one you do, but the relic part I don't think you build around that. But the ritual one you totally could.
Yeah, no. And a lot of the relics are like upgrades too, not so many. I mean, there's some level 0s, but the ones that are really memorable are a lot of these leveled up. So it might be a case, unless you're the type who plans out your deck extensively in advance, it might be a case where as you're adding more and more relics to your deck, then you start giving a look at Antiquary.
I'm just going through the ritual ones real quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at those as well. Not as long a list.
No, and there's not as many that trigger tests is what I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to Charms, where it's like just cool, a lot of assets that you play, but they don't necessarily have tests on them to do.
Right.
Just facilitating. So as we've gone through this list, I think I feel more positive about Antiquary. I'm not as hot on it as I am for Bruiser or Prophetic. I think those two are still better. But I think this is probably better than Crafty and Sleuth.
I feel like Antiquary, and I don't have any basis for this, so don't ask me to follow up, But I feel like Antiquary could lead to some interesting and weird deck building, more so than the other ones. You know what I mean? Like I feel like Antiquary is as close to introducing a new type of deck that we really haven't seen yet, that these tri-class cards are getting. I feel like this is the closest. You know what I mean? Like, just because Favor, Relic, and Ritual, especially Relic and Ritual, seem like there's enough of an overlap between those three to facilitate some weird stuff. Whereas Bruiser is obvious. Like there's a deck archetype already for Bruiser, and that just slots into it. Same thing with Prophetic. And then the other two are just, they're a little too disparate between those traits. But this one feels more interesting to me. I gotta go through the list of all those cards next time I build a deck for one of those classes and be like, ooh, what weird Antiquary stuff can I put together here?
Yeah, I think this is the one I might need to experiment with the most, because the more I look at it, the more I think the strongest pull there of the three classes is Rogue, because you have the favors, but also a lot of those like higher XP cost Rogue assets are relics as well.
Yep.
So when you combine those two, then I could see doing something there.
There's also 4, there might be 5 Rogue rituals as well. 4. There's 4. And some of them are pretty good. Like, they're not super high cost, but double is 4. Cost of 4 resources.
Yep. Haste is another good one.
Yeah, Haste. Yep. So, yeah, I think Rogue could make some good use out of Antiquary, surprisingly.
I might need to experiment with this. maybe I'll throw this into my next Abandoned and Alone, which is gonna be with Jenny. So
there you go.
It might be a good pull for Jenny.
And Jenny's her green medallion, or whatever it's called, Green Man medallion, is a relic. So if you decide for some reason to run that,
yeah, we'll see.
Oh man,
see if I'm feeling brave.
I don't even remember what that card does. I just remember I don't run it. So yeah.
It lets you pile up more XP, but on the other side you get the I can't even remember.
You get that Dark Young,
called, but yeah,
the one that just sits far away and shuts down your resource gen.
It really screwed me one time, and I've never forgiven it.
I think the last time I played that was in Unspeakable Oath in Carcosa, and I was in the basement and it popped in the yard, and I was like, "Fuck you!" Like, come on, man. I got a ways to go.
I was playing Undimension and Unseen, and that one card was enough to just like ruin the whole scenario based on what was happening when I had all these big things running around.
No.
So, yeah.
But I think overall, these 3 class cards, I really like them. I like what they... I like that we get a nice suite of, again, just grease for the wheels in general. And the ones that I'm not hot on, there's also that little bit of a challenge where it's like, okay, now I should build a deck that would make as much use out of this as possible and still be pretty viable, you know. So that's also kind of a fun little challenge as well.
Yeah, I think these are slow burns where I haven't been paying too close attention to what the big decks are these days on Arkham DB, but I don't think I've seen these cards mentioned a ton, so I feel like a lot of people are in a similar position to us. We're still kind of feeling out how to best use these cards and even whether to use them at all.
Right, yeah.
Remembering they exist and those kind of things.
Yeah, all right. So next we have everyone's new favorite permanent. Do you want to read In the Thick of It, Ian?
Sure. In the Thick of It is null cost asset, curse trait, permanent, limit 1 per deck, purchase at deck creation. When you purchase In the Thick of It, suffer 2 total physical and or mental trauma, then earn 3 experience. Whew.
Yeah. Have you used this?
I mean, I sure have.
Right.
Compared to the ones we talked about, I've definitely used this one. First off, more than anything else, I'm just glad it exists. Like, I love having these deck creation type cards where it tweaks how you build the deck, and like trading trauma for immediate XP is just it's just a really cool space to explore, I think.
Mm-hmm. Totally. In the Thick of It was one that I read it and I was like, all right, that's cool. And then like I made a couple decks and I was like, oh, wait a minute. If I take In the Thick of It, I can start with Aeon Chart, or I can start with Hiking Boots,
Right.
or I can, and then the mind just starts reeling. And now I have yet to build a deck that does not include In the Thick of It. Just because the ability to just to kickstart your experience gain and kickstart the final form of your deck, it's so good. And 2 trauma, as we've discovered, and we've talked about this in past episodes, and Scott and I have talked about it, and 2 trauma isn't that big a deal, because like you get the fact that you get to choose, like I can choose to start at 2 physical trauma when I have 8 health starting or whatever. Or if I'm a 7/7, I can choose to start with one of each. Like that little bit of freedom and versatility that you get out of this thing, I think that makes it so great. And then you got someone like Calvin who looks at this and is like, there's no downside. This is all upside.
It's all upside. It's just another signature for Calvin.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think there's any like disagreement on the strength of this card. I think most people would agree that this is at least potentially a strong option. I think the big discussion that has come up a few times among us is that question of like, well, is it an autoclude for every investigator? Because for me, I think I'm a little more hesitant than the rest of the busters about it. Like I will take it in some decks for sure.
Yeah.
And some decks not as much. I think I'm a little more wary of the trauma because, and I'm not sure exactly why it is. Maybe it's all my experiences in Abandon Alone. Riding that fine line of getting knocked out so many times. I think there's a few things that go into it. One is like, what are you getting for the XP? Because like 3 XP is great, but is it like what? I guess the question I ask myself is, what is it doing for me in scenario 1? Like, what is it doing to kickstart my deck, and how needed is that really? And that kind of determines whether I take it or not. And then also, obviously, the stat line of the investigator in terms of like physical and mental, and like that might determine, or at least determine, how I kind of apportion out that trauma.
Right.
But yeah, it just really, I think maybe too it might be because I play some of these low willpower rogue solo where it's like if you're constantly having to just like take these willpower things on the chin, maybe I want a little bit more buffer along the way. On the other side, maybe the XP lets me go a little faster. I don't know. It's hard to say. But for me, I don't think it's like an automatic thing. There's just like a lot of factors that go into it.
I mean, yeah, the 2 trauma isn't nothing. I know I downplay it. But that is still, it's like a free enemy hit, free enemy attack at the beginning of every scenario. It's just something you got to deal with. But I guess to me, it doesn't feel that bad. And I tend to run a decent amount of soak. I mean, obviously I play a lot of Guardian, and they're all about the ally soak, and they have some decent healing in there as well. But I mean, I'm running it. So here's the thing. This is where it turns into a problem. So I'm running In the Thick of It in both my Tommy and my Amanda deck that I talked about at the top of the episode. And I just grabbed those decks because I have them set up on the table behind me. I just grabbed them because I was like, what did I take? Let me look at the decks, and now I can talk about, what I did there. So for Tommy, I picked up an extra ammo or extra ammunition and level 2 Eat Lead. Because I wanted to make sure that I could get that Winchester game. Like, if I couldn't get Becky out and Winchester's what I had to go with, I had the ability to kind of capitalize on that. And then those paired with those level 0 hit me's is a nice way to ensure that I'm getting the tokens I want and I have the ammo that I need. For Amanda, and this is why I said this is where it starts to get dangerous, I included In the Thick of It I'm looking at my Amanda deck. I have no cards in here that cost experience that I didn't purchase with the experience from the scenario. So this is where it gets dangerous, because I was like, yeah, I'll include, like, she's 7 and 7. Well, now she's 6 and 6, and I didn't factor that part
Just
into my
extra hard moves.
Yeah, I'm literally in the thick of it. So now I've determined that I can't play in too deep until I get those 3 experience, whatever they are. So kids, when you're building your decks, make sure you read and remember the cards that you choose, especially if they have a cost in them that causes trauma.
Yeah.
One conversation that came up around in the thick of it when we were prepping for Iron Man at Sean's place, literally the night before, was in the thick of it plus Arcane Studies, the mystic card that gives you mental trauma but reduces the cost of XP spells.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the name of that card is.
It's Arcane the Third, whatever it is. I don't know. There's a bunch of arcane cards.
Arcane the Third.
But everyone knows which one.
Arcane Research.
Research, thank you. Studies is the mercenary talent one. But anyway, I was trying to convince Sean as Gloria to take both In the Thick of It and 2 copies of Arcane Research. I don't think that's a good idea, but I wanted Sean
part
to
of
do
that
it.
Is you just want to see him flame out. So.
I wanted to see Gloria start at 3 sanity or whatever. No, I don't. So like that's another danger thing. Like suddenly you're like, oh, and it's so perfect that Mystic is the one to get there. That it's like, oh, nice. Suddenly I can, not only start ahead, but get ahead faster, just at the cost of 4 trauma. Do you think that's worth it for anybody?
I don't. I mean, for me, like I already said that I'm like sketchy about trauma, so I think it's too much at that point.
Probably.
I think you either do one or the other.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
But damn, I wanted Sean to do it. I want him to do it so bad.
Especially with Mystics, kind of a lot of their, maybe not a lot, but there's quite a few key cards that will give you some horror along the way. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could have soaks, but yeah, I don't know. There's another question that goes through my head too about, and this maybe is like a whole different topic for another episode one day, but just about like, how much is XP really worth? Which is not to say that XP is useless. That's not what I'm trying to say. But like, I think because it's such a cool thing, like I of course too, when it comes to upgrading stuff and buying cards, like XP is good. As much XP as possible, it's going to make my deck better. But I think a lot of times we just take for granted that XP makes our deck better without really thinking through, like, is this really making my deck better? Like, because I think we all get to a certain, well, at least in certain campaigns, if you're doing really well, you might get a lot of XP, and you get to this weird point where you feel like you're just upgrading for the sake of it, and and sometimes you're like, well, if I take out this level 0 card, it's kind of affecting my deck, like, because this is such a key card. So I guess those are the kind of things that just make me think like obviously a lot of these XP cards have powerful effects and they are worth it, but I think it's just worth thinking through when you're making these decisions about like trauma for XP, like how much is that XP really improving my deck? Like, is it worth it? And then in some cases the answer may be a clear yes, like, and you just go for it. Like I've taken in certain investigators, because they're so based around like allies and soaks, like in the thick of it for an immediate charisma, because I know that's just like a big thing of what it's gonna do. But for other investigators, maybe not so much. They might be fine just starting at level 0.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I play a lot of Guardian, and there's never been a moment where I'm like, I'm good with XP now. I don't need any more.
You can keep that.
Yeah. I'm always like, well, I got one 5 XP weapon, but I could use another one. So, but yeah, no, you're totally right. There's definitely some builds, some investigators, where it's like that first scenario, you don't need it. Maybe you don't have to worry about it, and you'll be fine just pacing it out throughout the campaign like normal. But goddamn, it's so hard for me to say no. It is when it's like, hey, you can get 0 to 60 just a little bit quicker.
Yeah. I think another question for in the thick of it is, do you usually just like, okay, let me grab like one copy of a 3 XP card, which is important to me, or do you usually like spread it out among, let's say, like 3 1 XP cards, or like a 2 XP and a 1 XP, those kind of things?
So Scott and I have talked about this. I don't know if it's been I think it's been discussed on episodes, but we've talked about this in the past, at least off the air. Because I asked him that same thing, and he said he is firmly in the camp that you spend it on 3 1 XP cards because you want to elevate as much of your deck as you can with this, since you're spending trauma on it. I tend to agree with that perspective. That I think that is under most circumstances, I think that's probably a good default way to go. But I don't necessarily always go that way, because sometimes, starting with a Lola Santiago sounds pretty damn good, for a lot of rogues. Or starting with, I'm blanking on literally anyone else other than Lola Santiago. But you know what I mean? Like, there are those 3 experience cards that are really powerful, and even just getting one copy of it into your deck can at least feel like a big difference, even if it is just the one copy. So I don't know. I think, but I like I said, I think there's more wisdom in the camp of spend it on 3 1 XP cards. So
yeah, and it kind of also depends too on like why you're getting that extra XP for. Like, if you're getting it because you want your deck to hit the ground running in scenario 1, then yeah, I think spreading it out makes more sense. If it's more about like, I want to get a head start on my XP, and getting these key cards, then maybe you take that one copy of 3 XP card, knowing that it's crucial to your deck, and knowing that it'll be easier to get the other copy next time around, plus more stuff. So I think it kind of depends what you're really looking for. This card really just makes me philosophical about deck building, I guess. There's just so many questions to think about. Yeah. But I do also like sometimes if there's like a 3 XP permanent, like a Charisma, that it's going to start in play and have an impact, that your trauma will be worth it in that sense. Or if there's other like 3 XP permanents that play a similar kind of crucial role.
With this, you can start with Bruiser or Prophetic and really get your econ game going in Scenario 1.
Yeah, there you go.
I just thought about that. I will tell you this, though. I would feel like I'm playing the game incorrectly if I included in the thick of it and then just did like 2 level 1 magnifying glasses and like a 4 warned or something. I'd be like, I think I'm probably doing it wrong at that point. Maybe not. Mag Glass, level 1 Mag Glass. I know there's a lot of people who really like it. I'm not sold on it. I think it's fine, but yeah, like I think there are some. I think if you go with that route of like 3 1-ofs, there's definitely some card combos that probably wouldn't be worth the 2 trauma, in my opinion.
Yeah, that really depends on what you spend it on.
Yeah. All right. There's a lot going on within the thick of it, but I think it's a great card. I think it's a great inclusion. And much like Versatile, when that came out, it opens up a lot of opportunities for deck building, which is very exciting. But moving on from there, we have Heavy Furs, which is a level 0 neutral asset. Costs 2 resources, has a combat icon, item and armor traded. Oh, hey, armor. There's your Bruiser right there.
There you go.
Reaction: after you reveal a non-tentacle symbol on a chaos token during a skill test you are performing, deal 1 damage to Heavy Furs. Cancel that chaos token and return it to the bag. Reveal a new chaos token. It soaks 2 health, or it soaks 2 damage, no sanity, no horror, and it takes up the body slot.
I haven't played with this one a ton.
Nor have I.
Just because either I have something in the body slot already,
Right.
or I'm just playing an investigator that's not really caring about the body slot. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like when you look at it, this is pretty much just, unless you have a way to heal it, it's being able to like pitch back a token a couple times.
Right. It's, yeah, there's a lot of conditions on this. After you reveal a non-tentacle symbol on a chaos token during a skill test you are performing. So it has to be a skill test, has to be one you're doing, can't be anyone else. Non-tentacle token. And then you deal a damage to Heavy Furs. So you can do it twice unless you're running Lonnie. I haven't run this primarily because of the return it to the bag, honestly.
Sure. You just know what it's going to turn into.
Yeah, that part scares me. Vinny B in chat says, speaking of Tommy, yeah, this does seem like a great include in Tommy. But I'm running Bandolier, and I generally just like Bandolier better. So
it's an interesting one because I always look at it, I'm like, it has health soak on it, but I'm like, oh, but the ability is using the health soak. So like, if I'm just in it for the health soak, I could probably get something else.
Right, exactly.
Unless I'm playing an investigator that doesn't really have access to anything else. But yeah, I don't dislike the card. It's just I haven't found a good use for it, I guess, or compelled me to include it in my 30 good cards.
I like what it's trying to do. It almost reads, because we've had a number of cards in this as well, since this was the first time that we've had like all of the player cards for a campaign at once. We've noticed a couple times where we read a card and we're like, this card only exists because there's a leveled up version of it that does more. This Heavy Furs almost feels like there should be a level 2 or level 3 version of Heavy Furs, that has more health, or that you don't return the token to the bag, or something like that. But it does. There isn't. It doesn't exist. So then I'm just kind of left with this, like, the fact that you can only do it twice, and there's still like, what if you dealt the damage after you revealed the token? So then if it was the same token, you didn't deal that, or something like that. I don't know. It feels, it's just a little too. There's a little too many limiters on it to make it to the point where I'm like, I have better options in the body slot, I think.
Yeah, I think the only place I really want to try it, which I haven't gotten a chance to, is with Lonnie Ritter.
Right, exactly.
Where she could keep healing it, and then not only do you have the horror soak with Lonnie, but then you can keep using this ability over and over to redraw tokens, and that's pretty cool. And that's at level 0, so it's like you could just start doing that right off the bat. So I do like that combo. I just haven't tried it. I'm not sure how well it works in actual practice.
Right.
Like is this? I mean, is Heavy Furs really one that you're just looking at if you do have a way to get damage off of it, or would you ever just be like, okay, I can do it twice, and it's like, I don't know.
Network 57 in chat brings up a great point, which is this could save you from losing a bless token when you don't need it. That's a great point. So if you're running a bless or curse, I could see using this in a bless focused deck, and then probably upgrading out of it, a couple scenarios into the campaign, to make room for those other cards that do the same thing. Filter for bless and all that when you need it. So I could see that. I could see this being included for that.
Yeah, whenever I think about this kind of card, I often think about not so much like the modifier's too high, I failed the test, but more so like it's a bad stuff token and it does something really bad. Like I usually think of these kind of like token cancel cards for those purposes, like a token that's if you fail, add a doom to the agenda, or an enemy attacks you, or the enemy moves to your location, those really bad ones. That's where I think something Heavy Furs comes up, where maybe it's only doing it a couple times, but those couple times are like that bad stuff effect is so bad that it's gonna kind of kill your game. That I think that's where this one really comes in. But those kind of cards are always hard to judge or really figure out how good they are, because a lot of games they're not going to do that, and you're just like, well, that was a waste. But then the times when they do save you, then
it's suddenly the best card in the game.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Heavy Furs also is one that you might look at it a little more seriously in higher difficulties too. Because a lot of those symbol tokens on the hard side of the reference card, they do their effects regardless if you succeed or fail. So this might be one that when you pull that Elder thing or whatever, you're like, oh no, let's try something else. Let's just go for a regular fail token, like a -8 or something. So maybe there
And
as
then
well.
it pops out again.
Yeah, and then there's that, and then I'm
token
like, I
comes
knew
out,
it.
yeah.
I knew it. I should have let go of the token
Then
in the
you just
bag.
tear up the card.
It did, yeah. It didn't say let go. It said return it to the bag and then reveal a new chaos token. It didn't say to let go of the original one. So, yeah. So Heavy Furs.
Yeah, I'm gonna try out that Lonnie Heavy Furs deck at some point, but beyond that, I do agree. I think this is good space for probably an upgraded version. At some point.
Yeah. I'm excited to see Heavy Furs level 2, whatever that ends up being. But Ian, do you want to read our very good boy?
Yes. This is a very good boy, also known as Sled Dog. 3 cost, level 0 neutral asset, combat icon, ally and creature traits. You may include up to 4 copies of Sled Dog in your deck. Up to 2 Sled Dog cards take up a single ally slot. Action, exhaust X Sled Dogs, move X times. Action, exhaust X Sled Dogs, fight. You get plus X combat for this attack. Instead of its standard damage, this attack deals X damage and 2 health and 2 sanity. Takes up the ally slot.
I like what they're going for. But boy, is this slow and costly to get to something that's really worthwhile. But holy cow, do I like what they're going for.
It's the type of card, which I'm sure there's probably some Magic the Gathering term for, but I don't play Magic, where I think of it more in terms of like the Outlands in Lord of the Rings LCG, where as you put more out, they get more and more buffed. Right. And we haven't really explored that a ton or at all in Arkham before this.
Right.
And that's the space this is really exploring, so I like that. But yeah, I feel like to really get this going and your money's worth, you really need a way to either fetch them faster or get some good card draw going so that you're getting them out quickly enough. I have this is another card that I just keep meaning to try, but there's a lot of decks on my list to try. But I did try this once with Leo, but I've only played a couple scenarios, and I was running into the problem where I had one scenario where I had a Sled Dog out for this scenario, and the other one where I had no Sled Dogs out for this.
Yeah.
So that's probably my bad as a deck builder. That I need to include more ways of more card draw on that deck and more ways of getting them out. But that's really what I think you need to have.
Yeah, I did. I included Sled Dogs and the next card that we'll talk about, the Rod. And also in the thick of it in a Lola Hayes Animal Theater deck was what I called it. Because I was like, hey, they're neutral, so she can use them anytime. But yeah, I had the same situation where I think I got 2 of them out at one point. And I was like, sweet, we're getting there. And it just never got there. I never got all 4. I took Charisma and 2 Trauma just to get my Sled Dog game going. But God, I had too many instances where I had a Sled Dog in my hand and 1 resource, or I couldn't spare the action to play it.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty resource intensive when you're talking about 3 each time. Yeah. So like, it's kind of like a 6 cost ally if you think about it, to have 2 out.
Yeah.
And 9 and up to 12. But how many dogs do you think is worth it? Which is a funny question.
Any number of dogs is worth it, Ian. But in the case of this game, I would say if you only have 1, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
I think 2 is the dog minimum. I was going to say bear, but it's the dog minimum.
Dog baseline. Yeah.
But I think 3 is the sweet spot. Like that's when you're like, all right, this feels, at least for me. But yeah, that's 9 resources, 3 actions. Like you can't do that in 1 turn. Even on turn 1, if you draw 3 of these things, you can't you can't do that unless you have other stuff that's giving you those resources or whatever.
Yeah, if you take like the baseline, like 2 dogs, you get an action to move twice, which is pretty good. Usually you can't do that. Or like a +2 attack that does 2 damage, which is pretty good. That outperforms a lot of weapons. But again, you're spending 2 cards and 6 resources. So I almost think you need to, because I honestly don't know how often you're gonna get 3 or 4 in play. So I feel like your deck needs to be built to have 2 be worth it and be happy with that, because I think that's probably gonna be your most likely scenario.
Right.
Avid sled dog users out there, you might tell me differently, and that you have decks that get them 3 or 4 out often, in which case I would love to try those decks.
Right.
Because I want to see that happen too on my table. But my feeling is for a lot of sled dog decks that 2 is kind of going to be where you live, and then you're happy if you get 3 or 4 out.
Right. This card is already thick with text, but I really wish. So we played the Lord of the Rings TCG after Iron Man during our Dead CCG day. And so my mind's kind of in that. It's still kind of floating around in that sphere. But there's a collection of minions in that game for the Watcher in the Water, where there's 3 different minions. There's the Foul Tentacle, which is low strength, cheap minion. But when you play it, it says you may play a tentacle from your deck. And so then you find the Reaching Tentacle, which is a little bigger and costs more Twilight. But then when you play the Reaching Tentacle, it says you may play the Watcher in the Water from your deck. So it has there's this built-in acceleration to where the chances of you just having the Watcher or just having 3 tentacles or whatever is very, very low. Like there's this cool kind of build-up that the Shadow player gets to do. I kind of wish the sled dogs had some sort of way that when you play one, even if it was just the next sled dog you play this turn costs 1 fewer resource or something like that, or after you play sled dog, as a reaction, you could play another one as the same action. Some sort of way to kind of alleviate that action/resource cost. But this card's already full. There's no space for that. And I think taking either of the actions off would then... I don't know if they would feel as good playing them. You know what I mean? So...
Yeah, and I think what's really the strength of the card is that versatility, the fact that it does have both of those abilities, which are kind of crowding the text box, that they're not just fighting, but you can also move fast with them. I think there's ways that you can build your deck to get these out faster, like I talked about card draw. Someone had mentioned in chat Lucid Dreaming, which lets you grab another copy. There's stuff that goes and fetches ally, but then it gets back to that question of like, how much deck space are you? How devoted are you to the sled dog ideal?
For one action a turn.
The sled dogs, another part of the quote-unquote cost of this card, which isn't talked about a lot, is that if you do include all 4 copies, that's 4 copies out of a 30-card deck if you have your standard 30 card, which, that's taking up a fair bit of space, so you better really love the sled dog idea, and that is what you're building your deck around. But then how many cards are you going to devote to getting them out and fetching them? Which, there's decks that I've run that are very, very combo-y. Like my Mark Flamethrower deck was just all about making an Eternal Flamethrower, and half the deck is just based around facilitating that. So I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying, I don't know how often you're just going to include sled dog as that's kind of a cool idea. Let's throw some sled dogs in there. Because they seem like a very demanding card. They demand your attention, they demand your treats, and they demand that you devote a lot of deck space to making that happen. is kind of my feeling on it.
Yeah, I think where we're landing is if you're gonna run dogs, you gotta play fetch. Thank you. I'm going to be done now, so thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to talk anymore about sled dogs after that.
All right. Well, then let's go on to the next the card that when you opened the pack and you were rifling through the cards and you saw this, you're like, okay, I get it. Like, I get how sled dogs work now. The Rod of Animalism. It is a unique neutral asset that costs 1 experience, has a will icon, it's item and relic traded. You have 2, its game text reads, you have 2 additional ally slots, which can only be used to hold creature assets. Reaction, when you play a creature asset during your turn, reduce that asset's cost by 1, and it takes up the accessory slot. So, okay, here you go. Here's step 1 in making the sled dogs easier to get out. The fact that this thing doesn't exhaust to use its reaction, it's not the first time you play a creature on your turn, so it's literally every time you play a creature, it's cheaper as long as you have the Rod of Animalism out. So that's nice. It'll save you 4 resources across the whole sled dog team. Or looking at other creatures, guard dogs are 2s, stray cats are frees. So there's, this is useful. But you're not gonna run this unless you're building that deck. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna be like, okay, I have stray cats, let me take that Rod of Animalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, this is pretty much a sled dog enabler. Yeah. There are other creatures in the game, but they're kind of spread out. Yeah, you're probably not going to use this just to pay for guard dogs,
right?
Unless, no. I was trying to convince myself of something, but no, I don't think so.
But it
is one to keep an eye on in the future. Like,
yes.
It's likely we'll get more creature assets in the future, and in which case this could get more and more useful. Like, I would love to have a little collection of creatures eventually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot already, especially if you have survivor access. You've got the cats, you've got the other cats from the Dream Eaters, you've got the crows, the ravens rather, which I always forget about, but those are pretty solid allies. And then there's the black cat, the neutral ally. So yeah, there's a pretty good collection of creature assets. Is the summoned hound creature? I don't know. It's not super, it's not a important part of the discussion, but I just suddenly thought of it.
Yeah, it's just no, it's a summon.
Okay,
it's an ally and a summon.
Yep.
It's not a real creature.
Oh.
Sad. Yeah, so Rod of Animalism, obviously, it's probably something you're going to throw in the sled dog deck because it does reduce the cost a lot each time. Even if it's the 2 dogs, you're talking about reducing it from 6 to 4.
Right.
Although you have to pay 2 to get this out on the board, so it does gives you the additional ally slot, though, if you're planning on getting the 3rd and 4th out there. And so, yeah, this is really kind of an all-in option on the sled dogs, really.
Yeah. Too bad none of those tri-class cards targeted the creature trait.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
okay.
Nothing really else to say about Rod of Animalism. So do you want to read Call for Backup?
I shall. Call for Backup is a 1-cost level 2 neutral event, wild icon, favor, and synergy traits. 1 at a time in any order. If you control a rogue card, you may move to a connecting location. Guardian card, deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location. Seeker card, discover 1 clue at your location. Mystic card, heal 1 horror from any card. Survivor card, heal 1 damage from any card. Yeah, so we've seen some of as part of this expansion, some of the other do a certain effect for however many cards of different classes you control. But this is like the ultimate expression of that, the pinnacle, where it's just letting you do all these different effects depending on what classes you have.
I ran this in my Carolyn deck for Iron Man because at full Carolyn I had Guardian, Seeker, Mystic, Survivor all in play. Nice. And even not at full, by late in that campaign, I often had 3. I only got to play it a couple times, but both times I did at least 3 of these actions, if not 4, which was really nice. I think I'm quickly going through the other ones in my head. I am confident to make the claim that Call for Backup is the best synergy card. Yeah.
I will take your word for it because I haven't tried it yet. But, I mean, beyond the obvious, which is like Lola probably wants to try this out, I'm imagining. But as I have kind of evaluated the other synergy cards, I always try to think about, like, what's like the minimum case where you probably have 2 different class cards out, which most investigators can get to pretty easily.
Right.
And is that worth it? Because I think once you're hitting like 3 or 4 of these, then yeah, it's probably worth it.
Oh, yeah.
You know? But if I take just like isolate and say, let's say I'm like Skids, Rogue Guardian. Let's see, for 2 XP, I can move to a connecting location and deal 1 damage to an enemy there. That's probably pretty solid. Or like Seeker Mystic, you discover a clue, heal 1 horror.
Sure.
Maybe.
It's all right.
I really like the Rogue Seeker one where you move to a connecting location and discover a clue. That one is great. And I happen to like a lot of investigators that can do Rogue and Seeker. So yeah, it might depend on the particular class combinations in those cases, I think.
So the fact that we got Call for Backup in the same expansion as we got the 3 class cards kind of introduces a new level to Call for Backup. Like, it's like, okay, suddenly it's not so difficult for me to get to 3 on this. But here's the real question. We've already kind of established that most of those 3 class cards they're not your build-around cards. They're the cards you include when your deck is already leaning into one or more of those traits. So that being the case, if you decide, if you're going like, all right, I'm building a killer deck, I'm going to throw Bruiser in here, I'm going to put 1 copy of Bruiser in there, do you then go, maybe Call for Backup would be a good idea? I'm going to say, I don't think you do. I think it's weird because they go together. Those 3 class cards and Call for Backup go together so well. But I think Call for Backup is much more of the build-around card. Like, this is the one you take when you're like, my deck is going to do, the whole point is to get as many of this stuff out as I can. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to have all these different classes in there. Whereas the other ones are they're not the afterthought, but they're the ones, the 3 class cards are the ones that you're like, yeah, this fits. Okay, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, this is also a card, I do agree with you there that I think, although they go really well together, I'm not sure if they just automatically are bonded together.
Right.
It'll probably depend. And a card like this, again, I'm going to reference Lord of the Rings drink. What I also often found with similar cards in that game where they were like these neutral, like, oh, you can pick from all these different kinds of effects, is that sometimes people, including myself, would get tripped up in like deciding whether to include it because it's kind of hard just looking at those and be like, well, I'm not sure which of those I'm really going to need. And sometimes it's just clearer choice to, okay, I'm picking this card and it deals damage and I know that's what it's going to do.
Right.
But I think the versatility here is potentially can get you out of some situations or get you into them. You know, like we talked about, and the fact that you can do them in any order. So, you know, you can deal a damage to an enemy and then move away or like move in and deal damage. So I think this is always going to be a little tricky to evaluate, but I think this one can be pretty useful. Like the more I look at it and looking at what effects are there, where it's just like auto dealing a damage or auto discovering a clue for 1 cost. Those are pretty great. I don't know that I'm as hot about the healing, horror, and damage ones, which I'm not mentioning those as much, but those potentially could help you out too.
I was just thinking, because I was looking at Call for Backup, and I think there is a level 1 card that does one of these things for 0 cost, and that's Mono a Mono. Mono a Mono is 1 fewer experience, 1 fewer resource, still costs an action. In fact, it's even more limiting because it has to be your first action, but you get to deal a damage to an enemy at your location. So like, God, I don't know where exactly I was going with that comparison, but like looking at this, it's just like I think even at 2, well, no, but nobody likes level 1 mono a mono. You go for level 2 right away. Like, you don't play level 1 mono a mono. So I was gonna try and make an argument for including this even at 2 classes, but I think the card space is just too tight. I don't think you can find room for this if you're only running 2 classes.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get where you're going. Like, even if you think about like level 0 2 cost working a hunch to just get a clue,
right?
But yeah, I think it's really the versatility here
Mm-hmm.
that is why you take it. And actually, even though I said that I'm not as hot on the healing horror or healing damage, it's from any card.
Yeah.
So although most cards limit you to just healing off your investigator, this could be, it doesn't even have to be an ally. It could be, a different type of asset that has horror damage on it and you can take it off.
And it's heal 1 horror or heal 1 damage from any card. They don't have to be at your location. So in multiplayer, you can heal from across the map. So
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think I found the best inclusion for this when I put it in Carolyn, because
right.
I don't know who else could make better use of it. Maybe Lola, but yeah, I think that Carolyn build, and that was just a happy accident. Like, I didn't even think about it until I was just going through. I was like, let me look through the neutral cards and see if there's anything I want to bring as a last minute upgrade. And I saw this. I was like, oh, all right. So yeah, so that's nice.
Yeah, I like this one overall. It's definitely not an auto include, but I think I'm gonna give this one more of a look than I did before.
Right. I'm excited. I hope that we see an expansion. Not that's a bad word because that implies like an entire product. But I mean, like, I hope that we see the synergy trait get expanded upon in future releases, because we've gotten 1 of each class plus this 1 neutral, which they're all fun, but they're not, we don't have anything that kind of like fuels the engine of a synergy deck that is itself a synergy card. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have like an asset, like an ally or something, or a tool or whatever that interacts with multiple classes. And I think once we get a permanent, or an asset rather, that does that, that's when we'll start to see synergy become more of a solidified deck type. But until then, they're just kind of these one-off events that might be useful, might not be useful, so I'm excited to see more come from synergy in the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting deck space. I mean, usually at least historically in Arkham, cards usually don't care about what class your cards are.
Right, yeah.
For the most part. So I think that's why it's also taking me a while to delve into these synergy, because usually I don't care about the classes when building decks either, other than like, what can my investigator take? But other than that, like, moving to the headspace of I need to maximize the number of different classes on the board is not something that Arkham players have traditionally had to do.
Right. All right. Why don't we talk about the weaknesses real quick to round out our player card review. We've got 4 new weaknesses, basic weaknesses, in Edge of the Earth. They're all pretty similar, but they all kind of do their own flavor of the same thing. So the first one is arm injury. It's an injury-traded weakness. Revelation, put arm injury into play in your threat area. Arm injury can be healed as if it were a single point of damage on you. If it is healed, discard it. Forced, after you take a fight or activate action, you cannot perform any of those types of actions for the remainder of the turn.
This is a rough one.
It is.
Not just the art, but also...
I mean, that is pretty bad too, yeah. Ugh. Yeah, this one's bad because...
Fight or activate?
Yeah, like, you look at it and you're like, okay, so killers don't want it, but everyone else doesn't care. But holy cow, wait a minute. That activate action, that's on a lot of cards.
Yeah.
And not only among player cards, but also on scenario cards. So even if you have a deck that has very few action cards, which if you build that deck, I want to see it because I don't believe you. But then like there are a lot of scenario cards where it's like that's what you have to do is the action on the scenario card.
Yeah, and I've gotten this in Mystics before, where like all they do is activate all day. So I just throwing it back. Because the other hard part of this is that unlike most weaknesses, which you can usually get rid of with say like a double action or something, this can only be get rid of through healing, and it's not something that most I would venture investigator decks include is healing damage,
right?
Unless they're going for something specific. And you know the way the game goes, you don't find out you have this in until you've already built your deck. So you can pivot and include some stuff after the fact to include some healing once you know you have it in later scenarios, but it's a big pain to have to do that.
Yeah, I would hate to spend experience on medical texts just to deal with my arm injury. That would feel real bad. The flip side of this one, or rather its sister weakness, is leg injury. I think we can kind of talk about them together. Leg injury is the exact same thing except for its move, resign, or evade are the actions. Arm injury is probably generally the worst one just because of that activate action being so universal. But leg injury is another one that's like... I think leg injury hits certain investigators a lot harder than others, whereas arm injury is just kind of universally maligned.
Yeah, I think arm injury has I would agree, has a broader reach. But leg injury for the investigators, it does really target. It hurts, and it's the fact that like you can't take any of those type of actions for the remainder of the turn. So let's say you move, you can't move and resign if you're trying to get out. But probably more importantly, you can't like evade and then move, which most of the times you kind of want to evade and then move. So especially as someone who plays a lot of mobile evading investigators, if I haven't gotten this one yet. But if I do, it's gonna ruin my day because that just removes my whole shtick of like half my decks.
Oh, totally. The good news is at least there's a number of cards among like especially Seeker and Rogue that move your investigator without taking the move action.
True.
So there's at least that, and same thing with evade too. So at least. If you're building a deck that would be really boned by this injury, you probably already include a few answers for it, you know? But really, yeah, you were right originally with arm injury where it's like, yeah, you can heal it away. That's great. But that's the only way you can get rid of these. So chances are they're going to stick for a while, which that's a pain.
Yeah. That's what really makes it tough. But although I'm very biased to look at this one in the worst light, I know there are a lot of investigators who it's like, say a killer who doesn't move around a lot and is never evading, probably not super bothered.
Right.
Similar to maybe a Kluver who's not super mobile and has like Seeker cards that move you around without move actions anyway, can probably not super bothered. So yeah.
Do you want to read our last pairing of weaknesses?
So Panic is Revelation. Put Panic into play in your threat area. Panic can be healed as if it were a single point of horror on you, so instead of damage. If it is healed, discard it. Forced after you take a play, engage, or resource action. You cannot take any of those types of actions for the remainder of the turn. So horror healing, I think the one thing of note there is maybe it's just the way that I play, but I feel like I tend to have more decks with horror healing in it than damage healing.
I was just about to say, I was just about to ask if horror healing is more plentiful because it feels like it is, but I also kind of, I also kind of feel like that assumption is incorrect, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it's more plentiful, but I know at least for me, there's a lot of decks where I'll just throw in like logical reasoning to because a lot of treacheries are often like pushing the horror button. Yeah, so it just tends to be used more often, I feel like. Yeah. In terms of the actions, play, engage, or resource action,
I mean, play's the big one, right?
Yeah, because you're usually not taking a ton of resource actions. Yeah. Again, it kind of blanks out the rest, so you can't do like a resource to get the resource you need and then play.
Right.
And then if you're engaging an enemy, you're probably not doing a play or resource action anyway that turn. More than likely. Maybe.
There's a lot of events that are
true.
Great for
true.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're right.
It doesn't bother me as much as like arm injury, but I think there are situations where it can hurt you.
Totally. Well, how about comparing it to stupor?
And stupor is similar, except for this is the parlay, draw, or investigate action.
Okay, now hang on. Now we're getting into some bad territory here, because how many turns? I've had a couple of turns. I'm not proud of them. I've had a couple of turns where I'm like, I'm just going to draw twice.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then
more than I would care to admit.
Yeah, and then the big one on here, I think, is investigate. Because there's a very large number of investigators that just do that 3 times in a turn and call it good. So just triple click. I'm gonna investigate 3 times. I'm done. The parlay maybe not so much as a big deal, other than in some like corner cases. But the draw and investigate. So between the two, probably stupor hurts a little more. Right.
I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Unless, again, you're some killer who never investigates ever and you're not too worried about drawing cards, then maybe it's not a big deal.
Right. Do you think that well, I asked that, but I already know the answer. Like, these are ones that I could easily see one of us for Iron Man drawing these and going, oh, fuck no, I'm a coward and I reject my fate. Give me something else. I think one of them, leg injury was my alternative if I rejected my fate on my first one, which I don't even remember what my first one was. So I had the opportunity to have leg injury in Joe, I think, and I wasn't worried. I was like, that's not a big deal. Like, Joe could take leg injury and not have a big problem with it. I say that, but then, there's probably a scenario or two where I moved like 3 times in a row, so I don't know. But yeah, these are tough, and in general, I think most investigators will be fine with some of them, but then there's a handful that when they get any one of these, they're gonna be like, oh, fuck that.
Yeah, these are ones I was worried about going into the the weakness draw, because more than anything, just as we talked about, just the way that you have to get rid of them is tough. Yeah. I could see us pitching some of these back in the future. If I would have gotten it in the Carolyn group, then especially the horror ones, then maybe not. Sure. I might have been like, okay, just roll with it. Carolyn will heal me, hopefully. And that does speak to a point that maybe these are worse in solo versus multiplayer, because in a multiplayer group, there's probably a bigger chance someone is running healing, and a bigger chance that they're going to have the time to heal you.
Right.
Whereas with solo, you're going to have to probably, if you don't have it already, rejig your deck and hope you have it in hand when the weakness pops up in order to heal it, and all those
totally
horrible things to think about.
Totally. I mean, even Joe, like the fact that I was playing 4-player with Joe meant I had 2 copies of Logical Reasoning and 2 copies of Emergency Aid, and I had 1 of each in the Hunch deck and 1 of each in my regular deck. Just so that I had that because I was playing Flex Joe. So I was like, I want to be able to support the team with this stuff. So even if we had gotten them on that side of the campaign, it would have been tough. I wouldn't have been as ready to take care of him as I would have been with Carolyn, but I still had answers because it was 4-player and because I was playing Flex/support. So I was already kind of planning in that direction. But yeah, 2-player or God forbid true solo, like, this comes out in true solo for a lot of investigators. It's just sitting there. Yeah.
It could potentially wreck a whole scenario for you pretty easily.
All right. Well, I mean,
we did it. The edging is complete.
I know. Well, I mean, we got the investigators still.
Oh, that's true.
But
that's
true.
Don't get too excited.
I didn't think I would live to see this day. Oh, my God.
We really squeezed every last drop out of these player cards. milked it for like 6 or 7 or 8 episodes.
Oh my god, a lot. So many. We've been doing them for our whole lives. We're finally done.
Yep. This is probably what we're going to do for every Investigator expansion. So.
Yeah, Chaos said just in time for the next expansion to arrive. Yeah, you're right.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yep. All right. Well, that brings us to Tentacle time. So, Ian, what non-Arkham stuff have you been enjoying lately?
Well, a few things. Continuing to watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is amazing. I think it's going to end up being like my favorite Star Trek show since DS9,
wow.
which is it's just really good so far. But other than that, I recently got a gift of Dune Imperium, the board game, and I really wish Scott was here because I know he's been playing it as well, which is great because it's a game that I've heard a lot of good things about.
Yeah.
But because I'm not like a huge Dune fan, like it's fine. I like Dune. I like the book Dune. It's a cool world.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have so many board games and so little time at this point that it really needs to be like a really theme that jumps out at me and grabs me. So for those reasons, it's probably a game I wouldn't have bought myself, but since it was bought for me, I was like, okay, time to play this thing.
Right.
And since someone gave it to me, I need to actually justify getting it as a gift and play it. So I played it a couple times already this week, and it's such a good game. Everything I heard about it was true. A super well designed game. You can play it solo against
nice.
you can play it solo against a kind of automated opponent, or you can play it competitive against others, of course. And sometimes games, when they have like the automated opponent that's like racing you to victory points, it's not that engaging or interesting. But this one is. It does a really good job of putting pressure on you constantly. And both my games have been super close. I won the first game by 1 victory point, and I lost the second game by 1 victory point. And I also probably need to learn the game and get better at it. But it has a really interesting mix of elements. Like it has deck building in it where you're kind of, improving your deck as you go, which isn't necessarily a game mechanic that I get very excited for these days. To be honest. But I think because it's included, it's just one part of like everything else that's going on, it makes it more interesting. Like the deck building is just something you can do. So basically during a turn, you like place your different agents on the board, and each space gives you a different thing. It might be spice, it might be money, it might be, all kinds of things, and gaining influence of the faction. So just deciding each turn where you're going to place those agents is just pretty much the heart of the game. And then there's also this whole combat piece where you like each turn there's a conflict card, and it determines like the prize you get if you win that conflict. And so there's just so many different parts of the board and ways to try to go for victory. Like, are you just going to try to win every conflict? Are you going to try to like go a spice route and collect all the spice and get stuff from there? Are you going to try to get influence with all the factions? Are you going to try to improve your deck? So this is a super fun game. I think it's one I'm actually going to play quite a bit. And I think the more I play it, I think this one is going to end up being in my top list, maybe even my top 5 of board games. That's how good it is.
So is the primary mechanic worker placement?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay. Yeah, has a lot of kind of Euro elements to it, which, usually isn't my jam. Sure. But I think they found a way to make it feel very, very thematic, while also like having that Euro piece of strategy where you feel like everything you do is really has an impact on the game, and not necessarily reliant on a ton of randomness to it. But yeah, I think the way they implemented the mechanic, it really, even though some of it is abstract, it really feels like, okay, I'm building a spice and I'm getting influence with this faction, and like the Bene Gesserit faction like will give you more of the intrigue cards, which are these like one-time of effects that you can use to do something. And like if you cozy up to the Space Guild, then they can like dump a bunch of troops on the board for you. So like nothing in the game necessarily has a mechanic where it's like, oh, this is new to Dune Imperium. No one has ever done this before.
Right.
It's just that they found a way to like pull these existing mechanics together in a way that feels like really hits the right spots in my brain.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm just gonna talk about, basically gonna be talking ad this whole technical time. So a few things. First off, my Astral Tides role-playing game is available. The PDF is available for you to pick up today. As of hearing this, it's been available for about a month now, but yeah, you can get it from Drive-Thru RPG. You can get it from my website. There's also the Quick Start Guide that's available. A one-shot is available, and a full adventure is available. So there's a decent suite of products that are already out. That I have hope. I'll call them hopes. I was calling them plans. They have been changed to hopes of releasing more, but that's obviously very dependent on a few other things that are going on in my life right now. So I don't know if there will be more, but I wanted to make sure that I got those 4 products out and available, because it's a pretty good selection of stuff to kind of get you started for role playing in Astral Tides. Space Pirates. Of course I love the setting. It's super fun setting. You should definitely check it out. The quick start guide from Drive-Thru RPG is pay what you want, so you can decide to pay nothing just to see what it's all about, and then decide from there if you want to go further. But anyway, there's that. We have resumed our streaming of the Skies of Arthas, our Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition stream, in which you are a player in. Yeah, and we're getting to some pretty exciting stuff. The players just got your airship this last session. So a lot of the whole world map is now open to you all in a way that it hasn't been before. So that's very exciting. So you
made it to disc 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Please insert disc 2, and we're there. So you should definitely, if you have any interest in D&D at all, or RPGs or actual plays, or if you just like hearing us talk and have fun together, you should hop on twitch.tv/Nicholas Corey every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central for our live episodes. There you can use channel points from watching to influence the game in little ways here and there. And if Twitch isn't your thing, they're also available on YouTube. You can go to my channel on YouTube and find all the episodes there as well. And the last thing I'll talk about is another role-playing game, The One Ring, 2nd edition. I have bought into that a little bit. I don't have everything, but I have a lot of the stuff, especially the digital stuff. But I got a surprising email from Free League Publishing, the publishing company that does the One Ring RPG. And I'm racking my brain to figure out what the impetus was for this email. But they sent me an email with a bunch of press files for the One Ring, like Twitch backgrounds and logos and art and all this stuff. And they're like, nice. Yeah, and even I already had it, but they sent me a copy of the Strider mode, which is the solo or GM-less version of the One Ring rules PDF. And I already had the PDF, but they sent me a free one. So I'm looking at all this stuff that I got access to inexplicably. I don't know why. The only thing I can think of is back when Alien first came out, because they also made the Alien RPG. I emailed them and said, hey, I'm a podcaster. I do some Twitch streaming. If there's ever, and I was trying to sell myself as like a writer. Like if you want me to, like if ever there's an opportunity to write for the Alien RPG, I'm your man. And they said, thanks, we'll think about it. And that was the last I heard, was like them just going like, sure. Yeah, like basically taking my email and filing it in the trash can. That was the last that I heard. But then suddenly I get this One Ring email and I'm like, what the heck's going on? So now I'm kind of thinking, I don't want to start another game group or another game night, because I have you guys on Tuesdays, and I've got, with the baby, and we've got house problems going on right now. So I've got enough on my plate right now that I don't want to start another regular game group. Plus, there's obviously Mythos Busters obligations as well. But I was like, I have the solo mode, and I have all these Twitch resources. Maybe I should just stream a couple sessions of me trying the solo mode out. you know, and see if that's a thing. So if that's something that you'd be interested in watching, me literally playing a role-playing game by myself, I'd obviously engage with Twitch chat and, you know, that sort of thing as well. But trying a solo version of a role-playing game, I know a lot of people, it's a weird thing. I've done it before. I own another product that you can pair with any role-playing game and play it solo. So I've played D&D 5e solo. It's weird. But you kind of get the feel for it as you go. But if that's something you'd be interested in watching, you should let me know on Discord or something, because I'm thinking about doing it. And I'll definitely advertise it if I do it in the future. So look for that. If you follow me on Twitch, look for, I guess, a solo, a Strider mode, the One Ring. I don't know when I'll do it. It'll be some morning when I have time. I don't know. We'll figure that out as it goes. But yeah.
Yeah, I want to try that out as well because I have the One Ring stuff, and I saw the Strider mode PDF come through, but I haven't tried solo RPG stuff before, so it's kind of weird to wrap my brain around. But I do have an upcoming trip out of town coming up soon, so I was thinking of just taking it along with me, and or at least the PDFs, and then in the hotel just do some solo RPG.
Yeah,
no better time to do it.
Totally. Yeah, there's a lot of rolling on tables to answer questions. The one, I haven't done Strider mode, but I have done, like I said, one called a Mythic GM emulator. And that one is like you basically ask a bunch of yes or no questions until you get to a point where you don't need to ask any more questions. And then you make an ability check or whatever your game would call for. You know what I mean? And then it also measures like, how chaotic was that scene? What did it feel like the player, like you were in control of the scene or not? And so as the game gets more chaotic, your rolls for yes or no questions start coming up yes more often, which is very interesting, and that can lead to some crazy shit. But as the players get in control of it more, and it becomes less chaotic, that your rolls come up more often, and so things are less crazy and more kind of standard and all that. So it was an interesting kind of ebb and flow with that one, but that was a fun product, and I plan on using the Mythic GM emulator again in the future for other games as well. But yeah, Strider mode was just interesting because they take that concept and then they make it fit specifically with the One Ring and how those mechanics work, which is really cool. So
guess it's going to be time for the solo adventures of Grima Worm.
I mean, I shouldn't be surprised that you went there. Of course. The Grima RPG story. Yep. Very nice. Well, on that slimy note, we will call that an end to episode 131. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you to everybody who hung out in chat for the whole thing. Yeah, as always, as a reminder, give us a call at 203-493-MYTH. If you have anything you want us to talk about or anything you want to bring up on the show, that would be great. Join our Discord, mythosbusters. What is it? .gg? Is that what it is? I don't know what Discord